everyone, welcome to Dialogue on CCTV News. I'm Tian Wei in Hangzhou. The G20 summit in Hangzhou has just concluded. Many believe it is instrumental in putting forward new impetus into development of global governance mechanism. But has that really been achieved? What could be the role of the continent of Africa? Will that continue to be one of the most important topics for years to come when it comes to G20? To answer those questions, I will be joined by South African President JACOB ZUMA. But first, take a look at this.
JACOB ZUMA began his political career in 1959 when, at the age of 17, he joined the African National Congress. Although he had no formal schooling, he stood out as a smart operator within the ANC's military wing and then the intelligence department. He was imprisoned for 10 years on Robben Island alongside Nelson Mandela and later went into exile for more than a decade. In 1990, after the ban on the ANC was lifted, he returned home and played a key role in building support for the party in the KwaZulu-Natal heartland of its arch-rival, the Inkatha Freedom Party. As leader of the ANC, Zuma was sworn in as President of South Africa after his party won the national election on the 6th of May 2009. 5 years later, he was elected for a second term. During his presidency, South Africa and China have retained close political and economic ties and deepened their strategic relationship. Last Friday, President Zuma arrived in Hangzhou for the 11th edition of the G20 summit. As the sole African country in the global economic bloc, South Africa brought valuable perspective to the meeting. Zuma will remain in China and travel to Guangzhou in Guangdong province, where he will attend the second Investing in Africa Forum on September 7.
Welcome to CCTV News.
Thank you very much to be with you.
Mr. President, let me ask you, at the very beginning of the G20 summit this year, people are looking at the possibility of not only dealing with the short-term crisis, but also help to build long-term global new governance mechanisms. Has that been achieved?
Ever since 2008, when there was a global economic meltdown, I think the situation has never been better throughout the world. I think there could be one kind of few countries that succeeded to come up more clearly. I think many countries are still struggling to come out, but the movement now is indeed to get out of the trouble, particularly an influential economic region like Europe stayed in the difficulties for a long time. I think it was in fact among the developing countries that came in, like China for an example, played a very crucial role in cushioning to some degree the impact that would have been made. So countries have been struggling, all countries have been struggling. Yeah. So whatever we do, we do not forget that we are still dealing with the number of years kind of economic sluggish that we needed to deal with up to now. And that's why the question is, what do we do now in order to invigorate the economy? The summit that we had has been discussing how do we quickly move out so that we can grow the economy. Because we all accept the fact that we are not growing the economy at the best kind of percentage that we would want.
Right. During this year's G20 summit, the Chinese President Xi Jinping has made very clear at the very beginning that Africa will be one of the focal points. But it also depends on the other 19 economies of the G20, whether that will be the case and whether there will be concrete results. What do you think so far? We are already at the end of the summit.
Of course, President Xi Jinping made that point very clear, loud and clear. And nobody opposed that proposal. So everybody accepted that proposal, partly because they know the position of Africa, where Africa comes from. They also know the challenges of Africa. And therefore it is accepted that there must be a specific approach that is given to Africa. So that is accepted by the members, all members.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the specific measures that members or economies agree toward Africa's future?
China itself is involved in Africa. It has been involved for a long time. In Africa, we have, for an example, as Africans, made out our own program of saying, let us increase the volume of intra-trade among the African countries, so that we can have a kind of interaction or interventions that would be getting into specific things.
Right.
We have heard, for an example, 5 economic regions in the continent.
Right.
We are in the process of concluding, putting 3 of them, and we are pulling the other one so that we become one block economically. We are also creating infrastructure so that we create the interconnection and the flow of goods and people to be more easier. And therefore, that will also attract the investments because the conditions would be there. The infrastructure is ongoing, and investors are being asked to come and invest. So there are specific issues. So the proposal from President Xi Jinping is that here at the opportunity, let us focus on these. Of course, there could be more other kind of projects that you could come up with. There are many things you can do in the continent of Africa.
Of course. Mr. President, there are issues with your economy. For example, there are some estimates suggesting zero growth. So people are wondering, what kind of tools do you have in hand in order to change that situation, to put your economy on a better track?
Well, this is part of what we've been discussing as the G20, as to what do we do to boost up the economy, to, if you want, reignite the economy. What is that we can do? And I think the proposals coming from China through the president were very clear that we need to break and look at innovation as a critical driver of the economic growth, and you must have inclusive economic growth. There are many other kind of things that people are looking at. How do we do the situation? How do we create jobs? Do we need to agree? Because right now, if we say the economy is sluggish, it means the investors are hesitant to invest. They're sort of holding their money. And we are saying, let them be encouraged to do so. As a government in South Africa, we have, in fact, done a lot of job creation, trying to invest, trying to encourage the private sector. What, for an example, our view is that there is a need that all sectors should talk to one another. Because even if you want to reignite economy, if it is just private sector only, without government creating an environment, or without labor also, because labor and the private sector, these work together.
BRICS New Development Bank, it has been running for 1 year. Even the South African has now become the vice head of that organization. And also the AIIB, which has just started with their first board meeting, global board meeting. What do you think, Mr. President? Will these 2 entities provide your country with more alternatives, even the African continent, alternatives for funding of infrastructure?
Of course, firstly, our country as a country has had a program of infrastructure beginning in 2010. Lot of infrastructure, and thereafter we have a very massive program for infrastructure throughout the country, as a country. But also, the continent had taken a very deliberate decision to establish infrastructure that is going to connect the entire continent. And heads of states are actually leading that kind of, there's a committee that is leading that kind of infrastructure to ensure that infrastructure is there. So, but also, the question of funding will always be a challenge. So the emergence of the BRICS Bank has been one of the most important kind of happening in our society, because BRICS Bank is different from other big banks that would have stringent conditions, what to do, and therefore Africa and South Africa, all of us, are looking at the BRICS Bank as the bank that is going to make things easier. And the BRICS itself has that understanding.
What about the commercial viability of these infrastructure projects in Africa, including in your country? I mean, political instability for African countries has been a long-term problem, and therefore commercially viable is extremely important for these banks, even their development banks, to be sustainable.
Yes, that is going to happen because we have the projects. As long as there are projects that the bank will be paying for an example, infrastructure. Infrastructure grows the economy in whatever way. There are many things we are doing. We are, for an example, building ports, we are building airports, and that is going to allow the interaction with the world. We are one of the regions that has mineral resources that in themselves everybody wants. We are looking at creating an infrastructure so that we process it, so that we take the processed things abroad. So the issue of creating the economic activities is there. Once we have the infrastructure operating commercially, that kind of continent is going to be buzzing. In fact, it is one of the regions of the world today that is growing. It's a number of countries that are growing at a high percentage.
President Zuma, industrialization of the African countries have been quite a debate, shall I say, over the past few years.
Yes.
But how? How to do industrialization?
Industrialization waves that have come and gone, Africa was not touched. And other countries industrialized. It's for the first time that we are industrializing, because colonialists were not there to industrialize Africa. But in South Africa, you have a different kind of a situation, wherein there was industrialization, but not by the indigenous people, the majority, by those who came to settle. Now what we are saying that the black people themselves must create the industry. So for the first time, we are creating middle class, we are creating people who are going to own businesses for the first time. And everything that we create will be now a kind of industrialization of Africa with the Africans leading it.
Talking about industrialization, people look at China. Whether it's a China model or not, that's for debate. But certainly the China experience, what does that mean to you, Mr. President, and also other African nations?
China has done very well, and I think today it is one of the leading economies in the world. I think China, everybody look at China, how China is doing it, and try to get what is it that the Chinese have done. I think the Chinese do things in a Chinese way.
What is that Chinese way to your eyes?
No, for an example, when President Xi opened the B20, he made a very important point, that China is running socialism with the Chinese characteristics. Now that tells you China is a different kind of thing than other people. Because what does that mean? It means there are things that China has that other people might not have. For an example, the discipline. The discipline, once China opened up, whatever business was being run, there was seriousness, nobody could do a wrong thing. Because China, as you say, is not like, is hiding the fact that this is socialism with the Chinese characteristics. And that's why it is making this. Now, I don't think people are going to try to establish socialism, because socialism is established by a particular ideology. But what is critical with China is that the openness, much as they say so, but they are doing business as business, but guided by the Chinese characteristics. But what is important is that that in itself is a lesson to other people. How have the Chinese succeeded? It's because they've got discipline in the job they do. That's what people have got to adopt. For an example, the G20 that is here, I think the president was able to put such a clear direction where to go. And if we could follow that, we'll go very far. But others won't follow because other private sector in other countries are protecting their money. They don't want to invest. Now in China, once the money is there, it has to be invested, but it is also, China is also taking into account how to take people out of poverty into a situation where they participate in development. In other countries, the gap is widening because the richer becomes richer, the poor becomes the poorer. So much as we can learn a lot from here, but the people who are having, who could call the private sector, are not necessarily the same. So I'm just saying, we love what China is doing and we want to do it.
What can you do, really, to bring your economies and also your continent on track as efficiently as you wish, Mr. President?
And this is what we are doing. We have got plans. For an example, in South Africa, we have a national development plan, which is agreed by everybody. That in itself is not a common thing, but we have it in South Africa. So whatever we do, we are implementing this plan. So whatever we take from China, it helps us to do this. All what we need to do is to teach ourselves to be disciplined, but also to have the resources so that we are able to move forward.
We are talking to the South African President, JACOB Zuma. We'll be back after this. Welcome back to CCTV News. With us here, President of South Africa, JACOB Zuma. Mr. President, great to have you back. South Africa has been experiencing so much over the past few decades, dramatic changes taking place in your country. What do you make of these dramatic changes when it comes to the demands of qualities of political leadership?
Well, South Africa is a democratic country. It's just 20 years. The experience is very clear. Any former national liberation movement, in 20 years, there are challenges politically that challenge the political party. What becomes important, how is that party responding to those challenges? That is important. I don't think the ANC is different from other former political parties. What is important is that the party must understand what is happening and it must say, what do we do to deal with this? For an example, 20 years in South Africa, it means democracy has matured and people generally are beginning to make the choices having thought in one form or the other, and it means, for an example, for the first time in South Africa, we've just gone through the local government elections, wherein people have made their choices, and we had 3 metros, the big what you call, that we were tying for the first time. And then there's been an introduction of a new element of coalitions, because there's no one party could rule without talking to small parties. So that's a new element that has come in, that even small parties can now determine which direction a metro goes or a municipality goes. That's a new kind of politics.
But what does that mean for the used to be major party?
It used to be a major party. It means we have reached a point where the democracy is now taking another kind of turn. The ANC then has to say, how do we handle this situation as a big party in the question of coalitions? We must now begin to plan and factor in the issue of coalitions when we go for elections, because that's what it is all about. And this is the maturing of democracy. And that's what it is. I know that people have got a lot of speculations. And if people also, for the first time, they've got these difficulties, even if they've not lost, they feel like we've lost. But it's a development, because there is no country that can stay in one kind of a situation. If you look at old democracies, they don't have too many parties because they've been there for a while and parties have been sort of shrinking into either 2 or 3. So it's a process of democratic process that we are now 20 years, and therefore the politics, if you talk about winning elections, are beginning to introduce a coalition factor, which has not been the factor before.
Mr. Nelson Mandela had been so respected around the world. I remember a few years ago when Mr. Mandela passed away, you were the one announcing the news to the rest of the world. What do you think it is the most important part of his legacy? And what would that mean for all politicians, including yourself, Mr. President, of your country?
Well, firstly, President Mandela was made by the ANC to be greater. That is very important to know. It is the ANC that is much, much, much important to many of us, including President Mandela. He was part of shaping the policies of the ANC. And the ANC has not changed policy. So its leaders will always be there. But times are moving. And Mandela's legacy will always be remembered. Not just Mandela alone, Tambo, Oliver Tambo and others. And we are sticking to what Mandela practiced as a policy, believed in, and he believed in until he went, until he departed in this world. So we are the organization of Mandela. We are using the lessons from Mandela to run the organization, to run the country. So we think of Mandela as our leader who gave to us the lessons within the ANC framework, and we stick to them and will follow what Mandela did, and following that will never go wrong.
Mr. President, when you look at the African continent, what do you make of the role of South Africa? What do you think should be the role that South Africa plays on your continent or representing your continent worldwide?
Well, South Africa is playing the role already. Firstly, in the African continent, we take it as a priority that we work with them. We are participating in shaping the approach that Africa makes. We are participating in addressing the problems of the continent. For an example, we are there to keep peace. We are there to influence that there should be peace. We are there to defend those who would be troubled by violence, etc. We use the capacity we have. We are part, we don't do this as one country. We do this as part of a collective of the AU. And there we play a part. We play a part outside of the continent by sensitizing the world about the challenges of the continent. That is why right now, South Africa is the member of the G20. It's not raising its own matters only. It raises the matters of the continent. That's part of the role it is playing. When BRICS came for the first time to meet in South Africa asked the leaders of the continent, particularly those who have specific responsibilities, to meet with BRICS, to raise the issues with BRICS, and it was a very useful kind of meeting. That act has introduced in BRICS leaders what is now called the outreach. That when BRICS meets, leaders in the region would also come, which means that's how South Africa sees its role, and it is acting on its role.
On the African continent, there are a lot of countries that are running into challenges, just as in many other continents. But South Sudan is an issue that really stands out. Even the Chinese have sent peacekeepers as part of UN peacekeeping forces there. Some even got killed as a result of the violence over there. What exactly do you think the African continent as a whole can help to solve the problem and the crisis over there? And what should be the roles distinctively between African countries and for example, the United Nations and the rest of the international community?
Well, Africa is doing a lot in South Sudan, not only in South Sudan, wherever there is a difficulty. But in South Sudan in particular, there is a region where South Sudan is, which is called IGAD, of the countries there. They have been playing a role for a long time, working with South Sudan. There is also a group of 5 of countries which are aiding the African countries. We are working hard to ensure that there is peace there. We are also working as political parties that are very close to the ruling party there to bring in a political kind of issue. The AU has special envoys that work in Sudan under the AU. Of course, you do have United Nations also playing its own part. So all of these, but Africa is very much working hard to ensure that we've got peace and stability in South Sudan. It's a complex kind of situation, but there are structures that deal with South Sudan. And indeed, we are in talking position with them. We are even now, after the last incident, we are working very hard to ensure that there's stability in South Sudan. We would want United Nations and others to work with us, and we do work together with whoever is there. But it is our responsibility too. And as I say, we've got specific structures that we are working on.
Mr. President, South Africa is also a member of the BRICS countries. The BRICS countries have been very significant since 1999, after the financial crisis. And yet, we also see recently BRICS economies run into their own challenges. Some say BRICS are not that relevant anymore. What would you say after the BRICS economies heads of state met earlier in Hangzhou?
In fact, the BRICS summit will be meeting in India next month. Whoever says BRICS is not relevant is missing the point.
Why?
Because there is no country that is not facing economic crisis. Is there any country that is not facing?
There's a difference of degree, of course.
Of course, yes, because the countries are not the same. Here is China, is a leading country in terms of growth. It's BRICS country. I think people are just, because they've got, maybe they have an attitude towards BRICS and they exaggerate things. All countries are under difficulty. Which country is not under difficulty? Even the old economies, the EU, is it because they're BRICS? They're not BRICS, but they've got difficulties. Wherever you go, I think BRICS as a grouping is absolutely an important grouping, very important grouping. And if you look at it, you have here in Asia 2 big economies who are part of it. In Eastern Europe, we've got Russia. In South America, we've got Brazil, the big economy. In Africa, we've got South Africa. So these are serious economies that are coming together. And they've established a bank, the BRICS Bank, which is beginning to operate slightly different from what the IMF, World Bank, even the developing countries are looking up to BRICS, are looking up to the BRICS Bank in a serious way. So whoever says it is now not relevant, it's just expressing the wishes, really.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Thank you for your trust and your confidence, Mr. President.
Thank you very much indeed.